Welcome to meeting number 96 of the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members can attend in person in the room or remotely using the Zoom application. Pursuant to Standing Order 1064, the committee is meeting at the request of 4 members of the committee to discuss their request to undertake a study of the use of spyware by federal institutions.
Remind all members about the earpieces, making sure that we keep them away from the microphones to prevent potential injuries to our interpreters. The floor is open. Monsieur Villemur, commencez s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would have a motion that was distributed, and I'm going to read it. That as of January 29th, 2024, the committee undertake a study concerning the use of technological tools capable of extracting personal data from telephones and computers in investigative processes conducted by several federal government departments and agencies. That the committee focus in particular on the reasons justifying the use of this investigative equipment by the various government institutions and on the privacy risk assessment process. That the committee devote at least 6 meetings to this study. That the committee invite each of the following witnesses to testify for at least 1 hour. A. The President of the Treasury Board. B. Each of the senior officials of the following departments and agencies: Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada, Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, the Canada Revenue Agency, CRA, Shared Services Canada, the Competition Bureau, Global Affairs Canada, Transportation Safety Board of Canada, Natural Resources Canada, Correctional Service Canada, Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA, National Defence, and Royal Canadian Mounted Police. C. The Privacy Commissioner. And D. Any other expert witness that the committee deems necessary, provided that the President of the Treasury Board be the first of all to testify, and that the committee report its observations and recommendations to the House. Thank you. Thank you, Monsieur Villemur. The motion is in order. Do you have any words? You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Privacy is a fundamental right, and all our work has shown that it is important to focus on these topics. Canadians are concerned with what's going on with their data, and when we hear that organizations and departments might be using tools to identify data and spyware, and when we ask those departments if they did a privacy risk assessment, and we are told that they did not, well, then the committee has a duty to go and investigate what happened. Secondly, we'll have to correct what needs to be corrected, but we need to inform Canadians of the risks by using certain tools, and some of these risks are unidentified because these tools were being used without their knowledge. The Privacy Commissioner has said the same thing in previous reports, and that's why I believed that it would be timely to organize this meeting so that we can talk about all of this. Thank you. Thank you, Monsieur Villemur. I have a speaking list. We'll start with Ms. Fortier, followed by Mr. Green and Ms. Kuzi. Madame Fortier, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing this concern forward to the committee. I think that there are concerns some departments did not follow the procedures put forward by the Treasury Board. Mr. Chair, I would like to say that the government is not here to spy on people and departments. There are processes in place to be sure that there is a procedure approved by Treasury Board. I was chair of the Treasury Board, and I know that there are protocols. And what I find concerning is that departments did not follow these protocols. And I think it would be good to ask them the question first. We need to find out why they were not following the protocols that have been implemented, the guidelines that were set by Treasury Board. We could also ask the Privacy Commissioner to come to this committee and see how the Commissioner's office could look at compliance for those departments and look at procedure. I think that we could add a witness, the Privacy Commissioner, to that list. And the last thing is that I believe that it's too soon to ask the chair of the Treasury Board to speak first. I think that we should invite the different departments first and ask the Privacy Commissioner to share his thoughts. I'll stop there, but I wanted to comment on the motion that had been tabled, and after hearing my colleagues, we could perhaps put forward some amendments. I wanted to say that the Commissioner was there. It was point C in the motion. Thank you, Madam Fortier. Mr. Green.
Thank you very much. And I'm grateful to my friend from the bloc for ensuring that this is a priority. It's certainly something that we flagged as New Democrats, and I'll reference our November 30th motion, notice of motion, putting this committee on notice to the same. But I fully support why my friend Mr. Villamore would want to see this prioritized in this way. And you'll recall that in my notice of motion that I had in section J, subsection J, Chris Alward, President of the Public Service Alliance of Canada, and Jennifer Carr, President of the Professional Institute of Public Service of Canada, be added to the witness list. So I don't know if we could, maybe find consensus, Mr. Chair, whether through unanimous consent or on division, to have those witnesses representing the workers who are ultimately impacted by this added to this list.
Yeah, Mr. Green, I appreciate you wanting to add to that list. I will have to accept that as an amendment, if that's what you want to propose, and then we can discuss the amendment and then come back to the committee and see if we do indeed have consensus. If not, then we'll have to have a vote on it. Go ahead. So I'm going to take, Mr. Green, just to confirm, I'm going to take Mr. Aylward and Ms. Carr.
Correct.
Okay, Jennifer Carr as an amendment to the witness list proposed by Mr. Villamore. Okay.
Thank you.
Any discussion on the amendment to add those two witnesses? Go ahead, Mr. Kurek. On the amendment.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to Mr. Green, these are just additions, right? They are two. Okay.
Yeah. And
two
they were,
unions.
and the as Mr. Green said, the motion on notice that he's proposed, he's got those two names on there, so he's just looking to add them. So, not seeing any further discussion. Can I have consensus among the committee to add those two names to the list? I have consensus. Okay, thank you for that. Madame Cousy, vous avez la parole. Commencez.
You have the floor.
And thank you very much for the committee having me here today to be a part of this conversation. Mr. Chair, as you can well imagine, we were very concerned when we found out late last week that 13 different federal departments and agencies had this spyware attached to them, and they include, but are not limited to, Mr. Chair, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Environment Canada, Canada Revenue Agency, Global Affairs Canada. As a former employee of Global Affairs Canada, I'm especially troubled by this agency. The Canada Border Services Agency, the Department of National Defence, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and several other institutions are using this spyware technology, as I said, we became aware of late last week. So this is being used across government, Mr. Chair. This isn't limited to a single department, to a single agency. This is being used across government. What's even more concerning, Mr. Chair, is what this spyware is capturing, and it really runs the gamut of all communications across government, Mr. Chair. It includes text messages. All of those text messages employees have sent to their friends, to their family, and of course we all know we use our phones on a daily basis. The sensitive information included in these text messages, information about where your children go to school, if you have to pick them up, your place of work perhaps, any medical appointments you might have. The most sensitive information, Mr. Chair, is communicated through these text messages. Contacts, entire contact lists. Can you imagine your entire contact list being made public, being in the hands of the government, being exposed to exposure of being released, being shared with those you had not intended to share your contacts with? Photos, Mr. Chair. You know, I enjoy taking photos, especially at this time of year when there are so many beautiful decorations across the Capitol and elsewhere. But having your entire photo library, Mr. Kirk, being shared across government, that is absolutely concerning, and travel history as well. That the government, through this spyware, Mr. Chair, has a history of your travel. That's very concerning as well. This spyware, Mr. Chair, can also be used to access cloud-based data. What isn't in the cloud in this day and age? This is what this government has exposed our public servants to, having their cloud-based information across the network. Internet search history. I, for one, would certainly not like my internet search history put out for the public to see in terms of what movies I'm interested in, perhaps, items I'd perhaps be considering buying my family for the holidays. I mean, this is the most personal of information that we're talking about here, Mr. President, that has been gathered through this spyware and is now in the hands of government. Deleted content. We've all had content, Mr. Chair, that we have deleted in an effort to try and dispose of. Certainly, we've all heard the fact that once it's in the internet, it's out there forever. Who knew that with this government, once it's on your phone, it's with the government forever? But that apparently, according to this report here, is the case. And finally, Mr. Chair, social media activity. Every single post you've ever liked, everything you've ever reposted, every comment that you've ever made, if you are with one of these federal agencies, Mr. Chair, is now in the hands of government. Very, very concerning. And you know what, Mr. Chair, public servants are concerned as well. They are gravely concerned. They wonder, and I quote, why any government office would need such access to people's private information. But yet this is here where we are, Mr. Kirk and Monsieur Gord, at this point, where they have access to this private information. And I'll go on to quote two witnesses who were fortunately added here to the list. Ms. Carr, I should say, pardon me, President of the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada. We need to make sure that if our personal information is gathered, that we know about what information is gathered, how it's being used, and how it could be affected if there are others who were able to access it. My goodness, you have any breach of public information in this day and age, a responsible corporation immediately notifies you of it. In this situation, our public service wasn't even being notified of the collection of this information, never mind a potential breach of it. In a statement, the Public Servants Alliance of Canada National President Chris Alward, another witness I see you have fortunately added, called the use of such technology without a privacy assessment alarming and shows a deliberate lack of transparency and accountability by federal departments and agencies. These words could not be closer to the truth, Mr. Chair. But to add insult to injury, Mr. Chair, is I, in my role as shadow minister to the Treasury Board, to the president of the Treasury Board, in the effort to get a response from her, many media outlets were denied any communication from her, any statements. So I, yesterday, Mr. Chair, sent her this letter asking her, under Section 3.2, the directive of the Privacy Impact Assessment, to take responsibility for this. Because I hear my Liberal colleagues saying, oh, you know, we have these measures in place. They should be enforced. Well, the Treasury Board does have oversight of this under Section 3.2, where it states that the President of the Treasury Board holds general responsibility for registering all privacy impact assessments and reviewing the manner in which they are maintained and managed in all government institutions. And yet, we also see in the article, Mr. Chair, that we've learned that these departments' use of spyware did not undergo privacy impact assessments as is required under 3.2 of the PIA under the responsibility of the President of the Treasury Board. To add insult to injury. So, I mean, this just gets worse and worse. So in this letter, Mr. Chair, I hope you will be assured, my Conservative colleagues here will be assured, my Bloc and NDP colleagues will be assured, the government will be assured that I have called upon her to immediately enforce compliance. And if those privacy impact assessments are still not initiated by your end, follow through on the obligations by enforcing the consequences of non-compliance. Because this is certainly the very least that can be done when we find out that this spyware is in place after the lack of oversight by the Treasury Board, by the lack of oversight by this government, that this can at least begin to be made right. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, I'll say I think what concerns us most on this side over here, my Conservative colleagues and I, is what was referred to in an article which was just published yesterday, I should say, and that is the idea of and I want everyone to hear this phrase, the normalization of surveillance. The normalization of surveillance. Terrifying. It is terrifying. I think all Canadians should be consumed with the normalization of surveillance. I'm not even going to get into the digital ID issue here, but the normalization of surveillance, and they have good reason to be concerned, as we have found in this information that was uncovered last week. So I cannot state the urgency and the necessity of this study as brought forward, and thank you very much to my colleague for doing so. This must be addressed. This must be addressed immediately to quell the concerns of the public service and to further provide Canadians with confidence that this government gives a darn about their privacy, Mr. Chair. Following that, Mr. Chair, I too would like to move an amendment at this moment to build upon the motion which was put forward. And if the moment is right, Mr. Chair, I will read it into the record.
Go ahead.
Thank you very
Madam
much,
Kusi,
Mr. Chair.
Amendment.
That between the dates of January 8th and January 29th, 2024, the committee undertake a study concerning the use of technological tools capable of extracting personal data from telephones and computers in investigative processes conducted by several federal government departments and agencies, that the committee focus in particular on the reasons justifying the use of this investigative equipment by the various government institutions and on the privacy risk assessment process, and that the committee devote 4 meetings to this study.
Sorry, Madame Kusi, did you say that the committee devote how many meetings?
I believe 4 on the sub-amendment itself.
On the sub-amendment?
Correct, yes. Oh, excuse me, what's that?
Yeah, it's an amendment to the motion that you're
Correct,
making?
yes, an amendment to the
yeah,
motion.
okay.
Can you send that to me?
Yeah.
ETHI@world.gc.ca.
Here's what I'm gonna get you to do this. I'm gonna get you to read the amendment into the record. The last part that you finished out with the committee devote at least 4 meetings to the study, or do you want to keep it at 6, or do you want to move it to 4?
According to this, I would like 4, please.
Okay. So you want less meetings, correct?
My understanding is 4 on the contents of the amendment.
Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, just hang on a sec, okay? So let me just try to bring this back. So the first amendment that you've proposed, based on what I've seen, is start having the dates between January 8th and January 29th. So I just want to. So the clerk has got a copy of it. Okay. So just so that we're clear, the original motion had that as of January 29th, and what you're proposing is that between January 8th and January 29th, 2024, everything else stays the same after that, right up to process, and then the next part of the amendment that you're proposing, which is the same amendment, but you're saying that the committee devote at least 4 meetings to the study?
Correct, yes.
Instead of 6?
Correct.
Okay, so you want to reduce from 6 to 4 meetings. I've got that clear. And then on the rest of it, all of the agencies that have been identified in the original motion and the 2 that we added by consensus would remain the same, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm sending that at the moment.
Okay, so the clerk has received the amendment, and I think it's a fairly simple one, so I don't think that we're going to need to deliberate on this, but it's to change the date again for the benefit of the committee members from January 8th to January 29th, 2024, and then reduce the number of meetings from 6 to 4. That's what I understand the amendment to be. So I will give a second for the clerk to share that with the committee. It's done. Okay, so you should have it on your computers or phones. Oui, c'est dans les 2 langues officielles.
It is in both official languages. On the amendment proposed by Ms. Kuzi, I have 2 people who wish to speak. I'll start with Mr. Green, followed by Mr. Villemur. Ms. Kuzi, did you want to speak on your amendment?
Oui, absolument.
Yes. I think that the dates of the motion. We'll start with Mr. Green, then Mr. Villemur, and then I'll come back to you.
The amendment on the amendment proposed by Ms. Kuzi. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome Ms. Kuzi back to committee, and certainly, there's a keen interest in this. I think that's been expressed already around the table. What I would share with you is I will not be supporting this amendment, particularly based on the timelines on commitments that I'm sure many of us already have within our constituencies in that very brief period of time that we have back in our communities, including caucus retreats and other things that are typically held within this time period. And furthermore, like the notion that Ms. Kuzi's motion or sub-amendment, or amendment I should say, rather, is going to direct our line of questioning and reasoning is a pretty big presupposition. I think that we all have the ability as members of this committee to take our own lines of questioning, to focus on things that matter to us. And I think that, the motion that was presented by Mr. Villemur, I accept it as a 106 conditional that it be held on an existing meeting, because what I'm not interested in doing to my staff and to my community is adding all this extra stuff. And I'm just going to say this. This feels very familiar to the 10,000 amendments that are sitting on Bill C-50 and all the other shenanigans that are happening. And in this committee, I'd prefer to be straight up. I'd prefer to work within the framework and the mandate of our committee. And for that reason, I will not be supporting any additional meetings on those very few weeks that we have in our riding to reconnect with our community after the holidays. And I would just ask that we have that consideration to stay on track within this committee, to work in a work plan, whether it's through a subcommittee process as we typically do. And I still support the six meetings. And I'll say this on the record, that if we get to a point where we've exhausted our witnesses and there's nothing left to be had after 4 meetings, then at that point, I would be open to entertaining a motion that completes the study and allows us to report back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Monsieur Villemure, sur l'amendement, s'il vous plaît.
Merci,
On the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're adding witnesses but reducing the time. So it's a bit of a paradox. We wanted to receive all of these witnesses for an hour each, and so the math would no longer work. Secondly, I agree with Mr. Green that we need to give a break to our staff and we need to be in our communities. And we don't need to modify our work plan. I spoke to all of the different parties to ensure that it was fine, and I wouldn't want us to come back on our word on that. I agree completely with adding the 2 witnesses, but if we limit the number of witnesses, the number of hours rather, I would vote against. Thank you, Monsieur Villemure.
On the amendment, I have Mr. Kurek. Please go ahead, sir.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I would just note that I think that an issue of this gravity, and I know that we're undergoing, there's a number of important issues that we'll be addressing prior to Christmas. And as I discussed in another committee meeting yesterday, we can do multiple important things as time requires. But I would just note specifically that when having a young family, certainly the need to balance time in that regard. But I think it's quite valid to have, if we were to meet during break weeks, which I certainly hear often from constituents, they don't have an issue with us working, including quite often traveling back and forth. I'm a Western MP, so it's not always easy, especially when you have to deal with Pearson Airport to get here. But constituents certainly expect us to do the good work, and there's this unique opportunity, which, to speak to the change in the number of meetings. It makes perfect sense, because if we were to meet over the course of break week, resources would not be as big of an issue. We could have quite possibly longer meetings, so whether that's 3-hour meetings, it could be scheduled in a way that could maximize the efficiency of travel, and we could ensure that we are dealing with this important issue in the manner that, especially our public servants that could be affected by this. I think there's the fact that we have a lot of unanswered questions, and I won't speak beyond. I'll reserve a few comments, maybe, Mr. Chair, for the larger debate on the motion. I think I'm on that speaking list. But I think it makes perfect sense, and I certainly I know public servants will be working during the weeks in January that we're back in our constituents in our constituencies, and to be able to plan around that, I think, is entirely reasonable. Canadians expect us to be doing this good work, and while public servants are at work during those weeks in January, I think it's entirely reasonable that we get answers on their behalf, standing up for those people that may have had their privacy breached, and especially, and again, I won't get into the substance of why this is important, but the fact that we would not move expeditiously, I think, is not serving well those who work diligently to endeavour to provide the services that we all depend on as parliamentarians, but greater than that, the Canadians depend on. And the fact that those unanswered questions remain is deeply problematic. So a couple fewer meetings could be longer in duration. Get this done efficiently, ensure that we do the work that is required to get the answers that the Canadians, and in this case, those people that work for these 13 departments deserve. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kurek. Ms. Kuzi, I have you on the list on the amendment. Do you still want to speak on it, or?
I'm good.
Okay, good. Not seeing anyone else wanting to speak on the amendment. Do we have consensus on the amendment? No, we don't. Okay, so I'm going to ask Madam Clerk to take a vote on the amendment. And the amendment, again, a reminder to change the dates from January 8th to the 29th, and then reduce the number of meetings from 6 to 4. So on the amendment, Madam Clerk.
On the amendment from Ms. Cusi, Mr. Baines,
No.
Ms. Hefner. Contre. Mr. Callaway,
No.
Madame Fortier,
Non.
Ms. Latanzio,
Non.
Ms. Cusi,
En faveur.
Monsieur Gourde. Mr. Couric,
Yes.
Monsieur Villemur. Mr. Green,
Je suis contre.
yeas 3, nays 7.
It's like Duolingo.
Okay, so the amendment as proposed is defeated. We're back on the main motion. I have Mr. Couric, and then I have Ms. Hepner right after that. Go ahead, Mr. Couric, on the main motion. And just a reminder that we did add 2 witnesses to the main motion as well. So go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much, Chair. You know, it's disappointing that Ms. Cusi's amendment didn't pass, because I think that Madame Cusi, or Mademoiselle Cusi, I could say. Look, this is an issue where we have. It's quite shocking, really, and I know that we've heard a number of issues brought before this committee that speak to something that Mrs. Cusi indicated that is very, very telling, and that's the normalization of surveillance. You know, we had over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, we learned through the work of this committee after it was initially reported in the media, and we endeavored to get answers on the fact that millions of Canadians' cell phone records, the data, location data, incredibly detailed records, terrifying, quite frankly. And that's not just my words. I know I heard from many in terms of the witnesses that appeared before this committee, but also constituents and Canadians that reached out, sharing their feedback with myself and my colleagues, that the government didn't see a concern with that massive amount of data that was being used to pursue a public policy agenda. Now, we've had the discussions before this committee that there is a place, a time, for extreme measures to be used. We've heard that in the context of criminal investigations. We've heard that in the context of ensuring that children are not exploited. And we're in the process of a social media study that is addressing some of those things where there have to be those tensions kept. But Chair, what has been revealed is quite shocking, and I think that part of that. Let me just share a little bit of what I think is a culture shift, and where I as we see the evolution of technology take place at such a rapid rate. You know, I was a part of the debate in the House the other day that happened to involve some concerns around artificial intelligence, and even that there are some members that don't know what AI and chat-based AI was quite shocking, because over the last 12 or 13 months since specifically ChatGPT and there are a host of others, some of which are available in Canada, some of which are not, some of which are available to the public, others that are in the process of being researched. We see a radical shift taking place in technology, and yet the legislation that is governing many of the aspects of that in our country is decades old. In fact, much of the legislation predates the existence of these things that we all depend on, and that much of our life depends on. And I know modern workplaces and employers are in order to, sometimes it's to maximize efficiency and worker productivity. There's the bring your own device. A lot of workplaces have policies related to that. And there's this tension that does, in fact, need to be found, because of course we want to ensure that there's the ability for things like criminal investigations and other words to take place. But the fact that we see the government did not do their due diligence. This is the exact thing on this issue and the myriad of others. You know, it's almost too long to list the number of times where we have seen the government does not do their due diligence, which results in an erosion of trust in the institutions. The fact that privacy impact assessments were not done, that the concerns, and these are federal government employees, Chair, that expect their employer, the federal government, and by essence, the people of this country, they expect them to be respected in their workplace. That's a reasonable expectation. I think that as my colleague shared, that's something that deserves getting answers for. So and this motion that Mr. Villemere has brought forward is, I think, a productive step in that direction to simply be able to start getting some answers so that we can find out exactly why these questions were not asked in the beginning. You know, I am, quite frankly, Chair, very frustrated and tired of hearing ministers and senior officials sit before this committee and many others that say just one of a couple of things. One is just trust us. Well, I'm sorry. That's been proven time and time again. We can't do that. That trust has been broken, and trust is something that is earned. Certainly these Liberals have not earned the trust of Canadians, as we see demonstrated very often. But further than that, we see that they're simply not willing to take that extra work to do the additional and required, what people would think is required. So take the privacy impact assessment process as part of that. We heard from the RCMP when it came to investigative tools that it was coming. It was coming. Hadn't been done yet. When the media reported on it, they started the process, and they simply shared with us that don't worry about it, it's coming. Well, I'm sorry. That's simply not good enough. We need to ensure, and if due diligence is not done, it calls into question not only the motives. And look, it's within the realm of possibility that there are valid reasons. But if there are valid reasons, then those valid reasons should stand up to scrutiny. And that's where the government seems to be unwilling at best, but I fear it's worse than that. That they are not able to that it's causing the erosion of the trust that we should be able to have. In this case, in departments, as employers, and the host of concerns that are brought. You know, certainly the privacy of Canadians is a big issue. I hear that from constituents and a host of concerns. If the government is not leading by example, that's deeply problematic. And I know some of the press that we've seen on this is quite astounding. It really opens one's eyes. And when there is a host of other concerns surrounding this, we see that we have to get answers. I think that is the very least that we can do. And then in the process of getting these answers, we can, and I would hope, Chair, be able to make some very positive recommendations that allow us to provide the recommendations, the framework, the suggestions, and ultimately the accountability that is required to be able to address the concerns that are being highlighted. So I'll leave my comments there, Mr. Chair, but just to emphasize, let's get this done. I think we could have at least started that process over the course of some of the upcoming break weeks. However, nonetheless, it's an important issue that we should be able to get to work on, and I hope that the talk about the Liberals specifically wanting stuff, wanting transparency, wanting to get answers, and I'm sure we'll hear that here at some point. But I hope that translates into a yay vote for this motion so that we can actually get to work on it. Thank you.
Please remove Mr. Green's name. Ms. Hepner, you have the floor on the main motion as amended. Go ahead, Ms. Hepner.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start off by saying I agree. It's concerning that departments aren't following the privacy impact assessments. It's a really important process, and the department should be following that. Maybe that directive needs to be strengthened, and I think there's value in this study when it comes to that. But I think that we should be careful about our rhetoric and the and not using our words correctly. So, for example, spyware is not something that the government of Canada uses. Spyware is illegal. Technically, it's malware or malicious code. The government of Canada does not use any of that. The software that we're talking about is specialized software, and it's used in digital forensics, so part of incident response. This isn't something that applies to Canadians in general. It applies to public servants who work for the government of Canada, and it's specialized software, for example, that's used in internal investigations. So when employees are suspected of fraud or workplace harassment, and it's always done in accordance with internal protocols that govern the collection and storage of personal information to ensure its protection. So I'm just cautioning the committee not to use so much hyperbole. We don't want to spread fear among Canadians. This is not a widespread program that's being used across the board. It's being used internally to monitor employees of the government. And yes, I agree that there should be a study done to look at why the privacy impact assessments haven't been done by the departments, because that's the key here. That is what we need to get to the bottom of, and that's what we need to impress upon our departments, that it's very important that we do this work. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Sorry. Are you? Ms. Hepner, do you still have the floor?
No,
Okay. Sorry,
Thanks for your attention.
No, I was just talking to the clerk about one of the issues that you brought up, and I'll explain to the committee what I was talking about in a second. Mr. Baines, you have the floor. Go ahead.
I want to just echo some of the comments Ms. Hepner made there. Just to clarify a couple of things. Yeah, spyware is not used. It's malware or malicious code, which the government of Canada does not use. So I think that that needs to be clarified, number one. And I did want to talk a little bit about, just the way we're scheduling some of these things and how we're getting some of these departments to come before us. I think there's some challenges with we all know with the minister's schedules and we often don't know what the minister's schedule is, and I think it's important to hear this isn't a very important issue, of course, and if the privacy impact assessments are not being followed by these departments that's been set before them, I think it's important to ensure that we speak to each department, understand what's been taking place, and maybe just have the order of the witnesses that are being called changed around, where we get the departments in first, and maybe have the president of the Treasury Board, follow after that. So maybe just modify the scheduling of that, so we can hear from the departments first. So I think I'd like to move an amendment to what's been put forward here. And if we look at Mr. Villiers' motion, maybe remove the part of D, provided that the president of the Treasury Board be the first of all to testify, and maybe have the president appear later on. And so we're looking just at under B, where it says D, any other expert witness the committee deems necessary, and strike the provided that the president of the Treasury Board be the first of all to testify.
After D? So just for clarity, Mr. Baines, because of the agreement among committee members to have Mr. Aylward and Ms. Carr appear, that would now be D, and then E would be any other expert witness the committee deems necessary. And then you're proposing to strike the part that says, provided that the president of the Treasury Board be the first of all to testify. Is that what I'm understanding you to be moving here?
That's correct.
Okay, so where would you then have the president of the Treasury Board appear?
Maybe at E? Or sorry, or that's E, so the new witnesses that we've added are E, just to clarify?
Jennifer Carr.
Yeah, so just later in the, anywhere,
Depending on her schedule.
So
depending on her
That's what I-
schedule.
it doesn't have to be first. It can
No.
be somewhere
Somewhere
on the
in
list,
between,
right?
correct.
Yeah, it's on A, right? So the president of the Treasury Board will.
It stays at, it's just
So
the
it stays
timing.
there. So just so that the committee members are clear what you're proposing, that the president of the Treasury Board appear at some point
Correct.
during the study, but not necessarily to be first, correct?
Yeah, because we don't want to
Yeah.
delay the study in any
Okay.
way, based on her schedule,
Okay.
saying that she needs to be here first.
So I think that's clear, unless there's other opinions. Mr. Couric, on the amendment to have the president of the Treasury Board appear, but not necessarily first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I would just highlight one troubling trend that we see with the Liberals is the disconnect between Parliament and executive government. The president of the Treasury Board, as a minister of the Crown, I think it would be entirely justified for that that to be the first meeting that takes place. I think that the one in charge is incumbent upon the position. It speaks to that the necessity of accountability and the fact that the buck stops, and then, quite frankly, to the point, the practical matter that if more information comes up, this committee could pass a motion to have that minister appear again. The disconnect between what Parliament wants, says, and in some cases even dictates, is simply not respected by the Liberals. I think that the ability for that minister to attend the first meeting and to kick off the study makes perfect sense, and there should be there should not be a fear for that minister. If there is nothing to hide, there should not be a fear about the questions that will be asked and hopefully answered in that regard. So I certainly don't think we should support the amendment. I think that the president of the Treasury Board can start, and if it necessitates calling the president of the Treasury Board back, then so be it.
Thank you, Mr. Couric. We're on the amendment by Mr. Baines. Not seeing any other hands up. Do we have consensus on the amendment that's being moved by Mr. Baines? No. We don't. Okay. So I'm going to ask the clerk to call a vote on the amendment. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
On the amendment from Mr. Baines himself.
Yes.
Ms. Hefner,
En faveur.
Mr. Callaway,
Yes.
Madame Fortier,
Oui.
Madame Latanzio. Oui. Ms. Coucy. Monsieur Gourde. No. Mr. Couric,
No.
Monsieur Villemur. Oui. Mr. Green. Yeas 7, nays 3, oui 7, non 3.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The amendment passes. We are now back to the main motion as amended a couple of times. Any other discussion on the main motion as amended? I don't see any other discussion. Do we have consensus on we want to vote? Okay, Madam Clerk, if you can call the vote.
Alors, le vote sur la motion de M. Villemur, tel que modifié.
On Mr. Villemur's amended motion.
Yes.
Ms. Hepner. Mr. Kellaway.
Oui.
Madame Fortier.
Oui.
Madame Latanzio.
Oui.
Mrs. Coucy.
Oui.
Monsieur Gourde. Mr. Kirk.
Yes.
Monsieur Villemur. Mr. Green.
Oh, le motion?
All yeas, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we are unanimous in the motion has passed as amended. Do we move to adjourn? Mr. Green has moved to adjourn. Just before we get to the, I'll have to ask whether we have unanimous consent for that, but just before we do, I just want to remind the committee the notice of meetings have been put out for next Monday. The RCMP Commissioner and the Staff Sergeant will be appearing before committee. And then next Wednesday, as our part of our social media study, we have Twitter, Meta, and Google, YouTube appearing on that day for our study. So we have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.